Hello, you are listening to Lunatic Outpost Radio, brought to you by BiasPropaganda.com and LunaticOutpost.com. This is the Lunatic Outpost Radio show on Paranormal Discussion, which is a roundtable talk from LunaticOutpost.com's chat about the paranormal, and this is from Sunday, July 28, 2013. Thank you.
Tiny One from Lock Chat asks, can we hear ghosts even if we can't see them? I'm very open-minded when it comes to the paranormal. To me, paranormal is basically something that science hasn't explained yet. I'm not even sure I believe in ghosts the same way that everybody else believes in ghosts. People do have experiences with the paranormal in which they encounter something unexplained, such as what's perceived to be a ghost, but I don't know if that's a ghost. I don't know if that's the soul of a person that has died, or if it's something different. Maybe it's just something unexplained. My philosophy is not to jump to conclusions until you have enough evidence to reach a conclusion. But I've been wrong before, and so I'm not sure how to answer the question. I would think that if the ghost is a sentient being or energy, then yeah, there's probably some two-way communication thing going on. But if the ghost is something else, like, a blip in the time-space continuum, or, some resident energy from some form or event, then, probably not. You're probably just seeing it objectively.
I've seen probably the phenomena of either hearing a ghost or seeing a ghost, or both together. I have a friend who's a ghost hunter, and a lot of his ghost hunting is they don't see them, but they do record sound. On the other hand, I've heard of ghost stories where, for instance, they see the Roman soldiers marching, and you only see them from the waist up because their waist is at ground level. Well, the long ago Roman road is that far down, and yet the people don't hear a thing, they just see the ghost. So I think that's kind of either or. I think that's in how, if you want to call it a recording, that the person identified with the ghost is made, and how it was made, and that's how it would manifest, either with sound or with just vision or with both.
I have actually heard in the past that traumatic situations, specifically one's death or even maybe just an intense emotional situation, will cause like memories of those events to be imprinted on a location. I've even watching some TV shows, they seem to be doing some research, and it seems like it was either limestone or granite has a propensity to record that information more so than other material, which is interesting because, for instance, I forget which one it is, but that's what the pyramids in Egypt are made of. So it might have some type of antenna effect, or even if you remember the Thoth tablets, which are said to be emeralds, they might have some type of data storage in that sense of frequencies and vibrations.
We're all posting on a website called Lunatic Outpost, which is a conspiracy fun, general topic website. So I'm sure that there's some people listening that have probably had experiences they cannot explain. If they would like to talk to them live over the air to the community, all they need to do is click on the chat link at the top of the page, come right in here, and you can either mic up or you can type it into the chat, and we'll read it right on there for you if you don't want to come over live. So I'm just sending that invitation out to the audience.
Excuse me. We do have some comments here from on the thread on the forum. This is from Mr. Ifnok, and he says, "It is my feeling that paranormal activity will continue to rise, so much so that the zombie apocalypse may not be too far from truth. When this world begins its death rattle and prepares for the birth of the next, many things deemed as being esoteric will happen in constant increasing frequencies. Forward and high-speed rewind." Okay, here's another one. Let me see here. Flipping through. This is from Taiki. They say, I have had visits ever since I was a little girl. For years, nothing I could see, but could feel the presence and always knew it was malevolent. It got to the point of being like the old hag syndrome. I started drinking in my early teens, and that shut the presence out when I was drunk. Once I figured that trick out, I was rarely sober. I quit drinking heavily in my late 20s, and this thing came back with a vengeance. But this time it would take form. I woke up once to find this hideous-looking demon standing over me. Went on for years, and nothing I did would make it go away. Fast forward to about 3 years ago. It got to the point that other people were being affected. My son saw the thing once when he was little, and I was afraid it would attach itself to another innocent child, but I still didn't know what to do. I only had one OBE in my life by that time. One night I was asleep on my couch. I didn't go into my bedroom at night because it had taken up residence there. Next thing I know, I'm literally feet off the floor, flying through my hallway, and this thing came out of my room and manifested in this weird zombie-like form. We struggled. I was yelling and pushing it away from me. It was trying to suck me in through this big gaping mouth hole in its face. I finally shouted, "Get the F out of my house! You're not welcome here and you cannot take me." It went away and I floated back to the couch. It still tries to visit, but I must have done something right because now all I have to do is use a firm tone and it goes away. Not sure how it got attached to me in the first place, and it'll always be lurking near me, I think. But having a few tools has helped.
I, too, am one of those people that have used alcohol to drown out voices. But for most part, it's people who are in my immediate vicinity that are living. But it's good at that. And it seems, not to make light of Tyke's situation, it seems like I think a lot of people that are very intelligent and probably a lot of people that are very intuitive probably represent a majority of the drug and alcohol users and even a step further to abusers around the world, not only due to a personal experience that they're trying to avoid, but also because of like possible ridicule when asking for help or trying to explain it to someone else. In commenting on Mr. The earlier story, I forgot his name. Sorry about that. Isn't it in the Bible? I'm not that well versed on the Bible, but isn't there a passage in the Bible about the dead will walk the earth again? I remember a Stephen King novel where it was some type of apocalypse, and it was actually aliens at that point that had reanimated dead people and used them as like a Walkman for them to be able to communicate with people. Does anybody know if that's in the Bible?
I'm not sure of that one. I'm not sure of that reference, but I do know that it was an accepted fact that people did believe in ghosts. In fact, several times Jesus himself is mistaken for a ghost, and the first thing he says is, "Relax, I'm not a ghost." So it would seem that gives some kind of validity to at least people believing in ghosts.
I agree, and I think that Jesus was probably well versed in most of the esoteric stuff. I think that's probably where he disappeared to. Not to turn this into a religious rant, but I think that's probably what got him on the path of being a philosopher about the things that he was. That's pretty interesting. Do we have any other stories from the chat that anybody would like to share? Or do you guys have another comment?
I've got one here from the threads on the forum, and this is from Dan from the Hills, and he says, Premonitions. He's dreamt about his future and as seen through his eyes 3 times. The dreams included his speech, too, down to the letter. Quoting now, objects disappearing. One time I lost a bag of tobacco and my friend lost nearly a full bottle of whiskey that was in a cargo pocket on his pants. This happened while we were sitting in a locked car. This also happened a few times when I was younger, and I listened to my parents and simply believe I had misplaced them. The one common theme in all 4 events was my friend. He was there when the tobacco and whiskey came up lost, and in all 3 dreams.
Well, that is interesting.
I did want to share something.
I apologize,
I'm sorry, guys.
Rush. Go ahead.
For those who don't know me, people call me Rush for not just the band, but for a lot of different reasons. But I can relate to so much of this. Even in my earlier youth, spending time with Indians out at La Push on Washington's coast and people I knew I went to school with. And one story that stands out just so much so, of feeling that chill, seeing a shadow and having things move after the fact that it went by, even at a distance. I like the point that's one of you guys made about the intelligence factor of why we do suppress these things, because they're unspoken things. But thinking back in the history of like with the Romans and even past cultures, it was widely accepted to have that that afterlife going on. I mean, that's really what bound a lot of cultures, deliberately for the way that things have changed the world.
Yeah, I agree. I appreciate sharing the story. There's my mother is she's a bit of a sensitive when it comes to things like this, and she actually got some advice from me on buying ghost equipment like the electromagnetical gauges and like voice recorders to see what she could find in her house. She's a big supporter of apporting, which is she believes that spirits, ghosts, other dimensional beings are able to use their energy to bring things from one dimension into our dimension. She finds coins that have like significant value with dates on them between her and my father. And my dad passed away several years ago, and she uses that as kind of a confirmation that he's still around, that he's still looking for her. We've got a comment, actually a question from the chat from Tiny One. She asks, is it our subconscious hoping to see the ones that we've lost? And that segues right into that story very well. That's a good question. I think that the human mind, I'll start off with this part of the response. I think that the human mind is capable of incredible things. Not only will it facilitate creating memories that we need to fill in the blanks on things that we don't understand that might help us or hinder us in one way or another, but I think it's definitely possible for us to, imagine things like that to give us a sense of reassurance, of comfort, and a place like that in our world. What do you guys think?
Well, hi, this is Rush again. Really, yeah, the lack of knowledge we have of that much in-depth stuff. And I'll try to use a quick analogy. We didn't know about the sound barrier till we broke it. That was only 60 years ago, give or take. What have we not really fully taken in and understand about this kind of part of people's life? Premonitions, little doorways, and even being attached to such a voracious spirit. We shouldn't limit ourselves to understanding, or at least trying to.
It's hard to say how much is all in your mind, so to speak, and how much is actual external phenomena. But I have to go with there is external phenomena. My experiences haven't been so much with ghosts, but I have had encounters with angels before. And the first experience I might have chalked up to being, subconscious, and what I felt might have been, my imagination. But the second left actual physical evidence of the angel's presence. So I've I've got to say, yeah, it's more than just in your mind, because what occurred, I don't think would have occurred to my mind to manifest in that manner physically. So, well, all right, tell the story. A friend down the way had kidney stones, and his young wife came up, and she was quite agitated, didn't know what to do. We went down to his trailer, and he's screaming in pain. Well, we got to take him to the hospital. So I had an old Volkswagen camper bus that didn't have a starter. You had to push it downhill, which no problem where I live. So we started it up, went downhill, pulled alongside of his trailer, opened up the side doors. He was on a mattress, so we pushed that into the van, and we got in, and promptly the man died. So it's like, oh no, no starter, and there's many tree roots and everything around this guy's back door. So I thought, all right, how are we going to do this? I've got to push in the clutch and get the thing, started, and okay, my wife's got to push the van. It's like, well, this is hopeless, but we got to give it a try. So she walked around the tree to go and push on the van, but before she could get to the front of the van, now if you know a Volkswagen van, the front metal is right there by your knees. Well, the next thing I know, before she could get to the van, the front of the van dents in, hits my knees, and the van is flying backwards. Now, I barely had the wit to put the clutch in and get the thing started because I was quite dumbfounded. We were all dumbfounded because my wife hadn't even gotten to the front of the van. And off the thing started, and off we went to the hospital. But the dents were still in that van, and my wife was several feet away. So, explain it? I got to say, angels gave it a push.
Well, I'll add one to that. This is Rush again. There are those things that it just blows you away. I'll tell my story about this one. This was back in '96. My wife was pregnant with our third child, and she had a stroke. She died for 3.5 minutes. This was in her third trimester of pregnancy, and it was devastating. Not only just because of what had happened, but why I got my confirmation about how it's going to be okay. 2 weeks after that, she was in the hospital. I'm sleeping with one of my daughters, and I knew I was awake, at least so I thought. And I just felt like my whole body was just squeezed. I mean, the whole thing. And visually, I could see myself being basically pulled through my roof. And, I like astronomy, so, I'm seeing stars. But the closer I got and the faster I got there, I just saw these weren't stars. They were, you could just feel that essence of, no, wait a minute. Oh, okay, guys. I got it. And I felt like it was maybe 5 seconds. Once I realized it, maybe, a quarter, who knows. But then being thrown back to the room and waking up and just like in a deep sweat, could barely breathe. And I don't even think I really could even move for the first minute. I was so in shock. But the message I felt I got was like, okay, carry on.
That's interesting. That this conversation reminds me, I don't really have many like physical, like waking time reality interactions with multidimensional beings necessarily, unless I'm working with my plant magic, we'll say, as a person that follows the ancient, the archaic shamanic route. But where I do normally find interactions, and I'll explain one of these interactions, is in dreams. This is where I usually communicate with what I consider to be people from another realm on the regular. When my dad died a few years ago, and not to harp on this, but this is a ghost story show, paranormal show, I took it pretty rough, as I'm sure everyone does. It's tough to lose a parent, and the pleading and stuff like that. And and it seemed kind of rough. But after a few weeks, I was having a dream, and what happened was I basically came into awareness in this dream, and it was like I was on a submarine, and I kind of started looking around like I, someone would when they kind of like almost wake up in a dream world, and sitting at a metal table in front of me was my dad. So I took I busted out crying, and I took the seat across from him, and we just kind of like, made eye contact, and he was smiling and he was happy, and we didn't really talk in such a way or communicate like that, but I got an overwhelming sense of like well-being and relief and happiness, knowing that he had reached out to me and made contact, and that really put a lot of closure on the situation for me, which was really what I needed. Oddly enough, to kind of tie off the dad story, about 3 or 4 months before he passed, I was living in their house at the time, and I was sitting in the living room with my mom watching TV or doing something, and he kind of came out of the bedroom. He worked real early in the morning. He had to be at work at like 4 in the morning, so he was on a different sleep schedule than us. He came in and he said, "I had a dream that I was on a subway, and in the subway, the person on the subway said, this isn't your stop. You have to get on here. You've got another place to go." And he tried to, argue with the subway driver person or the door person or whatever those are called. And the guy said, nope, you've done your work here. It's time for you to move on. We've got another destination in mind for you that we need your help with, and that time is now. And he didn't, get a chance to make it out of there. He had to ride that subway to the next destination. And he walked in and he explained the dream to us, and he looked us both in the eye. And he said, "I think I'm going to die." He said, "I am afraid that you two are going to be stuck here without me, and I don't know what to do about it." And I've never seen my dad panic. Ex-Vietnam vet. I mean, he was, a badass in the most badass sense. And he was in there. He was practically in tears going, "I'm really scared. I'm afraid that I'm going to die. And I don't know how you two are going to, how I'll be able to take care of you anymore once this happens." And it gave us a good 3 months to really sit down and hang out with him and show him I had a good job. My mom was fixing to go on Social Security. We were able to show him, look, we'll be able to manage. Don't panic. Don't worry about it. And really, what's awesome about that situation too is about a year before that, I started hanging out with him a lot more. Almost every night I would come in and we would watch some kind of random movie or something like that. And I'd spent years away from the house and not hanging out with him. So it was really nice to spend that concentrated amount of time specifically concentrating on hanging out together. And so yeah, for the most part, my interactions with what I would consider otherworldly beings, be they ghosts, be they, spirits from an alternate dimension, be they angels, depending on your perspective, has always been through dreams. What about you guys?
Yeah, hi, this is Rush again. I'll answer your question first, because I love this topic, because not just what I've been through in that respect that I shared earlier, going into be a home care owner. I've got a few stories in that line, but getting back to your question. What was the question again?
Have you guys ever had any interactions with people or whatever in dreams specifically? Because that's the majority of the domain where I usually have my interactions.
Okay. That's such a deep subject. The thing I would like to share was what I call like my waking dreams. I call them my windows, and it's that deja vu feeling you get when you're someplace doing something and it just stops you in your tracks, and your mind just like boggles there for a second. And in my earlier years, they used to really make me feel really uncomfortable because I didn't understand enough about why those were there, at least by my interpretation now. And I get them from time to time. So to me, that little window of deja vu means, oh, apparently I'm supposed to be here. Now, is that destiny, or is that just a waking dream, or something else?
Comment from users in the chat room. My view is dreams are what I want to see and hear, but not real paranormal experiences. I'm going to have to agree with that, and I think a lot of paranormal experiences are probably echoing that as well. But I just haven't had any paranormal experiences. I've had experiences that could be considered paranormal, but I'm not convinced that they're anything outside of the norm.
Well, as I wanted to share earlier, because, like I said, the dream aspects, in my opinion, it's deep because some of it is your own mind trying to unload from the day's interaction and trying to interpret it in whatever form at that level. But sharing another ghost story, being in the care home business, I had several people die in my care. This was due to old age. It can be very devastating to someone who's not just trained, but kind of formally introduced, like the subject that we're on right now, to kind of understand. For instance, I had one lady, she was partially mentally disabled. Was she 89 when we got her? So it was only 2 years afterwards. But she loved to go out the front door and ring the doorbell to get back in, because she just didn't have the strength to open the door, but she'd love to go out and sit out on the front porch and look at the flowers and whatnot. When she passed away, not 6 hours later, she passed away early evening, and sometime before dusk, I think it was, 9:30 or so, the doorbell rang. And this was a second account, so I wasn't too surprised by this, because at that point, it was just that thing where she was just saying goodbye, or let me come back in, or whatever. So that can be left to interpretation as well. But that's pretty interesting when you've either never had that kind of experience before, like cats freaking out. We've had that happen as well. When someone passed away, cat would love to go to this lady's room, and the door was closed because she'd already passed away just a couple hours before. But the cat threw herself down in front of the door and laid there for a moment, and I just happened to be down the hall looking, and she jumped up, all the hair on her back, and she just bolted right past me, scared shitless. That was really interesting. These things are so hard to understand if you're not open to a lot of the awareness of a lot of other people's subjects that do kind of correlate with this stuff.
Well, the only related experiences that I have, sadly, probably have to do with death. And the morning my grandfather passed away, my father's son, I knew it happened when I woke up. Another time was when my sister died. We were on the way to Charlottesville Medical Center to see her, and I knew she had passed, and the cell phone rang, and it was bad news. One other time, I did have a dream when I was a child, in which I could vividly see the Space Shuttle Challenger do what it did. It's all true. That all happened. But what is that? Is that kind of a fold in time? Is that the way the human mind interacts with energy and the, mechanics of time and space? I don't know. I can't really call it supernatural because I don't have enough evidence to say that it's beyond what can happen in the universe that we don't know enough about.
Well, I'll tell you what, that's a good segue into another form of paranormal experiences, specifically premonitions. Now, like I said, I don't have much interaction with like ghosts or anything like that when I'm awake. But one thing that I do have happened quite a bit, and this has happened since the days of telephones ringing when I had a pager, or way back when they had pagers, and even now when I'm visiting LOP, and for instance, if I have a thread up, or if I'm waiting for a comment, or if I have a PM that I'm waiting for a comment to, starting at the beginning, I've always kind of, once I became aware of it, I kind of examined it more. But like the phone would ring, and by the time I got to it, I would kind of know who was on the other end. That happened enough as a personal experience that it caused me to be aware of the situation. And my pager would vibrate, and I would think in my head, okay, who would this be? And of course, there's the possibility that I'm running a numbers game in my head of who I'm waiting for to call, who it could possibly be, possibilities and probabilities and the thoughts that go into that. But as I have kind of honed that skill and gotten a little bit better at it, specifically like waiting for replies on LOP, I can sit there and be watching a movie or listening to a song or doing whatever it is that I'm doing, and it'll kind of hit me all of a sudden, and I'll go, oh, I need to go check the site. And sure as shit, I'll reload the web page, and there'll be that little yellow banner that says I've got a PM waiting, or I'll see that somebody's replied to a thread that I was waiting for a response on. That's happened enough that I've had to put some thought into it, and kind of saying, like what you were saying, Entropy, getting to a point where you are engaged with this type of energy, where maybe you're familiar with this energy, or if it's on a personal level, like somebody that you know. And they've done experiments on people making connections with other people and thinking thoughts, and all the way across the world, that person knowing when that person is thinking about them or sending their, has the intent to communicate with them. So in the realm of premonitions, which this isn't like predicting 9/11 or anything like that. It's, just going, well, this is probably such and such that's responded to this. I now know that there is a PM waiting for me, and less about who it is that sent the PM, but more about that it's there, and sure enough, it was always sent within a minute or two of when I had this premonition, paused my movie, refresh LOP, and there it was. So in the spirit of premonitions, do we have any stories of that? What do you guys think? Is that a bunch of malarkey, or is that something that am I playing a numbers game in my head, or is that something that's going on?
I don't believe it's malarkey. I'm just not sure that it's.
Well,
I think
this is Rush
supernatural,
again.
paranormal are terms that we just throw out to describe what we don't understand. I don't think we've gotten to the level of understanding the mechanics of how these things like premonition, ESP, telepathy, stuff like that work. And if you look at the cases in which they do work, or they appear to work, or they're alleged to work, they only work at certain times. It's not an on-demand feature of the psyche, so to speak. So to me, that says that there has to be certain variables that are clicking at the same time in order for that kind of stuff to happen, which would indicate to me a natural process of the universe. We don't understand space and time completely, or the human mind. We know that energy and matter are connected. We know that thoughts are energy. So just take it from there and, draw your own conclusion, because right now that's as good of a conclusion as we have, because there's not a whole lot of evidence to really research this sort of thing.
I'm sorry if I catch you off, Entry. This is Rush again. The thought that I have with that is we're not being told enough. Stories of twins, mothers and their children. I mean, the stories, just coming from family and friends and stuff like that. That's a lot of evidence in itself. But what are we not being told about what these things that we're kind of hush-hush about because it changes the whole dynamics of the society as well.
To answer your question with a question, who would tell us? Does anyone actually have knowledge of, these sort of things? I don't know. I'm not so sure it's a guarded secret. I think it's more of something undiscovered. That's just my opinion.
Well, entropy, this is liberty, by the way. I definitely think that there is a culture of repression for things that we don't understand. And how there's a culture of repression for things that we do understand, but are just outside of the accepted guidelines of behavior and thought patterns and groupthink that people are willing to propagate. So I think when people look back 50 or 100 years from now, they'll see that we have just a very narrow avenue that we allow experiences to participate in. And anything outside of that avenue is got any number of negative responses, negative feedback, different ways to suppress it, different names we call people. If you think back to, for instance, the Salem witch trials, this was probably the greatest travesty that men have performed on women since we were dragging them off in the caves by their hair. This was basically men taking powerful women and brutalizing them and murdering them because of alternative thoughts and basically because of their strength. And they actually, I think it was the Catholic Church that, and not to badmouth the Catholic Church, they've done good things too. They published a book of, I forget what it's called, but it was basically how to root out strong women, in parentheses, witches, in your community. We look back at it now, and these weren't evil, satanic, baby-eating, horrid, demonized, possessed, women. These were women who fell outside of the Christian paradigm or the acceptable paternal paradigm that we've been under for, at least 2,000 years, if not longer. And they were basically demonized in such a way that we fortunately have religious freedoms in America that we've allowed that Wicca and things like that have had a chance to blossom and come out of the past and express themselves now. And now that we are able to look at that with a rational eye, these are people who used alternative forms of healing and things like that. They were able to use aloe to help with burns, and they were able to, put together a combination of herbs to help you sleep better at night. And that was helped somewhat by the New Age movement. I'm not a fan of New Age. I kind of feel like it was people profiting off of what was inevitably going to come out as esoteric information. And it eventually, when you put that kind of profit margin on something, that it's taken over by carpetbaggers and people who are charlatans and things of that nature. So it didn't have its fair share of time in the sun. But in conclusion, I think that anything that falls outside of just the very small acceptable ways and means that we have to identify and communicate our experiences in reality are definitely demonized, and that's not great for anybody.
Well, certainly agree with you. There's groups in society. It's not just at the top. It's you got little groups, that want their power and their fun, whatever. And yeah, there's still the demonization of independent women in the world, because there's nothing more than, a group of men thinking alike will fear the most than a strong, intelligent woman that is willing to call them out. It's the same for anything. That kind of stuff's been going on for centuries. I do agree that there's information hidden from the public. There's information that's classified for whatever reasons, whether it's to make money or to protect freedoms, unquote, or for what they call the greater good. The funny thing about the greater good is the greater good is a term that is very subjective. It can be defined in any way by any group or any person that thinks that they're in control of the greater good. You know, what I'm interested in is fact. Fact to me is the most powerful force in the universe because you cannot change fact. You can change perspective. You can change opinion. The fact's always gonna stand. When everything else comes out in the wash, the truth will be there. And to me, humanity has, you know, they say we're awakening. We've always been awakening. You know, when we discovered fire, we were awakening. When we invented the wheel, we were awakening. When we found out why it rains, you know, we were awakening to different facts of how nature works and how the cosmos works and the mechanics of it. But as far as ghosts, ESP, paranormal stuff, I'm not so sure that's kept secret by intent. I think it's kept secret by ignorance because we just do not have the tools or the knowledge, I guess. Maybe some argue that we did at one time to know what all this stuff is, to recognize it, to investigate it. You know, one thing when you go into investigation is you pretty much know what you're going in to find out. You have a question or a hypothesis or something you're trying to answer. You know, with a lot of these things like a ghost or, you know, ESP or something, you have an unknown. Well, first you have to define that unknown. How do you define the unknown? You have to find out what that unknown is. Until you find out what that unknown is, there's really no way to go in and investigate to whether or not it's real. That's the only things I would say to your argument. I agree with all your points as far as, you know, our society and our puppet masters and even our little bitty groups, you know, and our Go Team Go and, you know, Redskins, Cowboys, whatever. You know, it works along the same guidelines in any social group.
That's true. And while I was sitting here thinking, one of the things that we are able to do now, we've kind of abandoned some of our supernatural fears and superstitions and things that have kind of kept us in a small little mind box, because I do have respect for faith and I do have respect for belief, and I think those are probably two of the strongest things that we as humans that we have available to us, and probably is a large thing that help us propagate what we believe our reality to be. It's probably, I've always thought since I was a child, and I always thought that everybody else thought this too, that we create our reality through, and I came to the understanding of like the words and nomenclature later on through intent and things like that, not to butt this up with any popular, infomercial type of things for sale, like, you can, this is how you can have a huge boat and a nice Mercedes and stuff like that. But I did always feel like our intent is what guided the creation of our reality, and we did it for ourselves. And that doesn't necessarily exclude any beliefs in God or any religious system or anything like that. It's kind of using that as a tool, from whatever you feel your creator is. What gives us, what may give us a clear indication of what's happening as we move into even greater technological advances are ways of measuring this, these different experiences, the scientific tools to that are sensitive enough that can actually help us figure out what's going on around us. Because in my mind, these are all things that are related to frequencies, to vibrations. These are all, that's basically what makes up the physical universe is vibrations and frequencies, and variations therein. So in getting the electromagnetic measuring devices and in having very sensitive voice recording instrumentation that I just had okay. So as far as recording, like I forget what, they're not EMPs, they're voice manifestations in different different, audio spectrums. When I was living in Arizona, I was probably 12 or 13 years old, and I had a copy of, and this is hilarious, and feel free to laugh your butts off at me, a copy of Shout at the Devil by Motley Crue, and I'm sure many people are familiar with this, and thank you, Entropy. And this is Liberty talking again. I should probably announce myself a little more often. The electronic voice phenomena is specifically what I'm talking about. This was on a cassette tape, which is a form of magnetic recording. I was listening to it. It was like, dum dum shout at the devil or whatever, and like it broke kind of like away from that and kind of drifted into this kind of weird pan flute, and like I don't remember what the voice said, but there's like a kind of voice talking in the background, and this real trippy kind of pan flute, and kind of like how you have the things wind chimes outside, kind of that type of tone and that type of feeling, if you can imagine a pan flute going with wind chimes in the background, and some muddled voice saying something, and then it kind of broke back into the song, and I hopped up with my 12-year-old self and ran in there and announced this to my parents, that I had just like heard Satan talking to me, or whatever paradigm I was in at the time. So that specifically was my first and probably most significant experience with electronic voice phenomena. I'm curious if it makes it around to somebody that's got a story about that. It'd be interesting to hear. And we've got some new chatters in the chat room, and I appreciate you guys showing up. And of course, anybody that's listening right now on Lunatic Outpost, if you want to participate by sharing your stories with your microphone, or you can type it into the chat room and we'll read it. Of course, you can also type it out in the thread that we've got going on the front page of LOP, and one of us will read the story into the chat room. Let's see if we've got anyone else that wants to share a story or has a comment or any remarks. I do, while we're waiting, we had some issues in the... we had some issues with chat. Some people had to reload, and I can expand on some stories that I've got from my family that we've always had, at least a few scare stories that have been passed back around. I've got an aunt that her husband passed away recently. She's got a big old house, and she knows no fear whatsoever. She had a TV come on at full volume in one of the rooms, like her bedroom, and she was in the kitchen, and that's probably 3 or 4 rooms away. She hustled over there to turn it off, and they've got like the old-fashioned sliding doors, like French doors or something like that, and they were together, and she wasn't able to open them. So there's a second entrance to the room. She hauled ass around to the second entrance, which is through a bathroom, and she was able to get in there, and of course the TV's on. It's full volume, and she runs right in there. She turns it off. She goes, "Ah, damn it! Who's in here? Who's messing with all this?" And not talking to a person. She doesn't think it's a human being. She's addressing, whatever spiritual being this is that she's thinking is in this room, messing with her television. And of course, she didn't get any feedback. And I'm not sure that it ever happened again, but I always, whenever I heard the story, which was more than once, we always had to go, "You did what? You ran right into the room? You did that?" And so some people handle those situations with more bravery than others. For instance, if I was chopping up a lemon or something in the kitchen and a TV popped on full volume, I would hop out of the kitchen window and probably call, somebody and ask if I could stay the night at their house, and then cut the power off and walk in there with a 4-barrel shotgun or something. I don't know. So it's interesting to hear the varying levels of bravery and, in my case, fear probably, that people handle these situations. It looks like everybody's back in the chat room now. Let's see if we've got any comments or some stories or any other discussions to further the topic. I've got one more story that I can share. There's a family story from my mother. and we would all be sitting around at my aunt's house telling these stories with the lights off and stuff. So you can imagine I'm probably 8 years old hearing these stories, and they had a lot heavier effect on me at the time than they do now that I think back on them. Her story was and this was in southern Illinois, and everybody lived in real old houses. You know, it was kind of a small town. There wasn't a whole bunch of new houses or anything like that. So the houses had been there maybe turn of the century, beginning of the 19th century, and everybody thought their houses were haunted. She was in one of these houses, her house. I'm not sure if it's a house she grew up in or one that she later moved into with my dad, and she was in the bedroom. She had a wardrobe door open, and they had a rocking chair in there, and she was changing or something like that and putting clothes up, and she closed the door on the wardrobe, and of course it's got a mirror on the outside because it's a dressing implement, and she was able to see the rocking chair in the reflection of the mirror. Now, the chair was rocking, and there wasn't anybody that she could see in it, but there was a hand that was coming out of a shadow that was on the arm of the chair, and it was an old lady's hand, and it had a ring on it. So if you can imagine this, looking into a mirror on this wardrobe, and it's nighttime, she's fixing to go to sleep, I think, and it's just this light cascading across this really old lady's hand with a ring on it, and there's nobody else in the chair, and it's rocking. It scared the crap out of me, and it was a great story then. Let me do one more round and see if we have anybody else that would like to share a story or have any input or comments or anything like that, and we'll go from there.
I have like a little one where I seen a ghost. The first time I seen a ghost, when I woke up, I saw a white figure, and then the other time is a ghost was peeking up the side of the wall, and then I can't really remember the third time, but I had some ghost stories, a little bit, but not too much. This is Raquel. Raquel. Yeah.
Well, we lived in this small town, and my mother worked at this bakery, and she used to go to work at 5 in the morning to, make bakery goods. And she said that, there was this, like, sort of an entity that used to come around in the mornings and make noises. She said that it even flushed the toilet one time. So I thought that was interesting.
Flush the toilet.
I guess that was her story.
Thanks for sharing that Titanic one. This is Liberty again. It's good to know that ghosts at least have proper hygiene in most areas, and respect for businesses by making sure their business gets taken care of, so to speak. Raquel, I appreciate you sharing your story as well.
Yep. Even though it was boring.
Yeah, next week, I think we're going to try and get an actual ghost hunter in here, and maybe he can explain the ins and outs of all the equipment that they use, the places they go to, and just kind of the nuts and bolts of actual ghost hunting. Hopefully next week.
I hope that happens. That would be a really good show to listen to. That would be a good show to participate in. Sorry, I take off my headphones when I talk, or I get lost with the echo and stuff. You'd have to do this to understand what I'm talking about. But my best friends actually over, just across the state here, actually do that sort of stuff. They're amateurs though; they're not professionals. One of them's a school teacher, and one of them is a network engineer for a university. But that's what they do in their spare time. They go out, they try to find stuff. And so far they haven't found anything, but they've had a lot of fun chasing it around, I guess.
and I know we've got a lot of, at least a few loppers that are interested in ghost chasing as well, and I'll be sending out invitations to them, and you are all definitely invited to join us next Sunday as we discuss paranormal activities, as it were, with our guest. We'll have a thread up about that later on in the week to give the specifics. I appreciate everyone showing up, and Entropy, I've got the same problem. I've got about a 5 millisecond delay in my headphones, so I've got to take them off my head when I talk too. So all technical things aside, it was a lot of fun, and I appreciate everybody that showed up and everybody that posted in the thread and all the participation that we've gotten across everywhere, and I will talk at y'all later. Thanks, everybody.
You're welcome, Liberty.
Yes, thank you. And thanks to everyone. Thanks to Nolo. Thanks to the audience that showed up and everybody that shared their stories. This was the first run for a live roundtable discussion directly from chat to LOP Radio, and that's what we did tonight. And I think it was a pretty good first run, and we'll get the bugs worked out next time. Thanks for joining us. Have a good night. We're going to close this broadcast now, and if you'd like to say hi to us, we'll be in the chat room here at lunaticoutpost.com. And have a good evening.